For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Dan Weber for instant analysis of USC's Tuesday practice of Arizona Week. Now, Dan, I want to start off with what you took away from your interviews with the coaches and the players tonight, because what I heard from you, the word you kept using was analytical, but I think you need to explain why you heard that from how these coaches were processing the loss to Notre Dame.
Yeah, I thought it was one of those, how do we take what happened at Notre Dame and transfer it to what happens the next 6 weeks? And how do we figure out, what we did well, what we didn't do so well, what we need to improve on, where are we in the passing game? How come we're not seeing as much of it, as we thought, and not seeing as many receivers as we thought? Where are they in terms of the run game now with Vavae Malapai not going to be there for a few weeks? What does that mean for Marquise Stepp? What does it mean for speedster freshman Keenan Kristen? It looked like they're really trying to think about, okay, what are we going to do, going forward? How do we take all the good things that happened in the Notre Dame game and have more control of making those happen, over and over again? And so I like kind of what I heard in terms of how they're going to try to take that. And it didn't sound like they were blowing smoke. It sounded like, this is we got a plan, we got a path here. We're going to improve, week to week. And they ought to be good enough based on, if they can improve week to week based on last week, they ought to be good enough to have a chance to, there's nobody that they necessarily can't beat in the second half of the season. They just have to do it.
Yeah. In case you didn't hear the news from Clay Helton's Sunday night conference call, as Dan alluded to, Vavae Malapai, the starting running back, elected to get surgery today, Tuesday, as Helton described it, to clean up his knee. He'll be out for an undisclosed time, so that's a big loss to USC's running back core. But like Dan said, they have other guys. Keenan Kristen could be that guy. They were trying to save him for the red shirt. Look at those 4 games where they want to use him this season. But we got to talk to Mike Jinks, the running backs coach, today, and he was a little coy, as he usually is with the strategy, but it sounds like they want a third running back in that rotation.
Yeah, they definitely do. Graham Harrell said he just didn't think they could get through with 2 running backs. And we're kind of kidding about the fact that, Notre Dame ran Tony Jones 25 times, and but then he's got support from quarterback Ian Book. So they had 2, but USC seems to think they really need that third guy ready to go. Now, whether, what kind of a load they would put on, and they always mention Quincy Jonty, and he is a really good walk-on who does deserve to be mentioned. But whether they'll put in some special stuff for Keenan, I've always wanted to. When you've got the fastest guy on the field almost every week, you'd like to see them figure out a way, because he's also a tough kid. He's not a track guy who's just dabbling in football. He looks like a football player. He can put his head in there and run it up inside. So I've been a little disappointed that they haven't come up with some ideas for him yet, although they may not have told us this. They may have just predetermined that he was only going to go the 4 games for the and keep his red shirt, and so they weren't going to think about stuff to get him in there yet. And now they may be forced to. I'm not sure. The kid's really going to be a very good player. You don't know how many of them are going to go 5 years anyway. So I just think. Looking forward to seeing him on the field. Maybe, Khalil Tate won't be the fastest guy on the field.
Yeah, we'll see. But I know USC fans hear that about the Vavae news. Obviously unfortunate, but they might be happy about Marquise Stepp getting more playing time. I know some USC fans have been clamoring for that. Given from what USC's coaches saw from Stepp against Notre Dame, do you change your game plan at all, knowing that you have a guy who can be that bruiser and has proved it now over the course of this season?
Well, I think if you're going against Arizona, they're not exactly Notre Dame on defense, and they don't have that kind of physicality. Do you think, we'll play a little, if they're going to drop 8, we'll play a little bully ball, and we're just going to line up and just knock them back, and run it into the end zone and force them to come out and play you a little more straight. I don't know, and maybe force them to not be able to be able to afford to double anybody. That's what you got to be able to do. And now that clearly Marquise is going to be on the field a lot, I think maybe you are looking more at that kind of power run game and see if that sets up your passing attack. So it might be going back to, that was like traditional old style USC football. Run the ball, run the power, and force them to defend it and then throw it over the top in play action. So the air raid may be evolving or devolving or whatever into something that USC fans say that looks pretty familiar.
Yeah, and there was a lot of talk about the air raid and the concepts around it, just because we haven't necessarily seen what they had promised it to be coming into the season. I know Graham Harrell talked about having a receiver rotation of at least 8 to 10 guys. It's pretty much been those 4 starters rotating through. USC's been averaging around 35 passes a game, which is a little bit under what they were averaging last season in 2018. And then there's also a lot of talk about tempo and how much that changed the game for USC's offense in the second half against Notre Dame, and how that speeds up the game for Keaton, kind of gets him into the rhythm. And Clay Helton said it gives the rest of the offense can feed off of that rhythm from Keaton. But there's a lot of talk about the air raid. What did you take away from that from both Keaton, Harrell, and Helton?
Yeah, I mean, Harrell is talking about, we're not using 8 or 10 receivers, that's for sure. We're using those guys. And he said, here's the deal. They're in really good shape. And we're not doing enough during the games to gas them. So he said, you're going to keep them on the field. I mean, that's just the way it is. There are probably ways in the second half of the season that USC can force the action. He said, teams are not in any hurry to run their offense against us, and then they try to drop as many people into coverage on defense. So he said, teams we're playing are definitely slowing the game down against USC. Will Arizona do that? Will Colorado do that? I don't know. I don't know exactly. Will Oregon do that? I think it'll be interesting to see getting into this, week after week after week of Pac-12 football.
Yeah.
Will those teams try to, slow them down? I mean, Brigham Young did. That's how kind of Washington plays. And Notre Dame, very comfortable doing that. But I'm not sure that I see that in a lot of the other teams on the schedule. So I think it'll be interesting. I mean, I think that makes the second half of this season really interesting. But I thought you didn't see any panic. You didn't see any woe is me. I thought it was kind of an upbeat, but a smart, upbeat approach today. Whether there's enough, we saw some tackling drills that looked a little bit different in terms of, linebackers 10 yards apart, DBs 20 yards apart, and having guys run at one another, not really full speed, not going to the ground. But working on on the hit, the contact, and the wrapping. I'm not sure that's enough, but they're moving in a direction where they're moving in a direction that
Sure.
You obviously got to tackle somebody. But I thought I was a little bit encouraged by what we saw today.
Yeah. Now, in terms of Arizona's defense, statistically speaking, tongue twister, they rank pretty low, especially in passing defense. If there were to be a time for the air raid to reemerge, this seems like this would be the weekend to do it, correct?
Yeah, I said especially, I believe, because they should be able to run the ball. And I don't think Arizona can just load up, in the secondary or drop 8 all the time. And just, this is your chance to really make somebody pay the price. I don't think they made Brigham Young pay a price. Brigham Young should have been made to pay a price for dropping 8. Washington should have been made to pay a price, and they weren't. They kind of almost made Notre Dame pay a little bit of a price. I mean, Washington, they ran for a lot of yards, but they just didn't. 3 turnovers, 3 interceptions just took them out of it. They could have made. I mean, when you think about that, you take those away. Like they didn't have any turnovers at Notre Dame. Had they done that at Washington, they win that game probably.
Yeah.
And so they, the good things they did, they negated. But here, they had just a couple of penalties and no turnovers. If they can keep that going, and then really firm up the run game, I think the passing game will come around. It's not, it's not been bad. It just hasn't been as much of a factor as you thought it was going to be.
Yeah. As far as injuries go, the Trojans are definitely banged up on defense, as you could probably tell by watching the Notre Dame game. We know now that nickel Greg Johnson is out for the Arizona game, and then Palaie Naioteote is struggling there as far as returning. Clay Helton referenced him as questionable. Isaac Taylor-Stewart is still having a high ankle sprain. He said that his progress is better than EA at this point. And then who else am I forgetting? There's one more.
Josh Fallow is still.
Josh Fallow's still out with that MCL sprain, and there's another DB
Elijah Griffin.
Elijah Griffin, yes, has a bulging disc in his back. Did not practice today. Clay didn't give a prognosis for him, but it did not sound good there.
That didn't sound good. No, and I'll give him this. Watching him come out, I would have thought that. Keely Eure had a better shot maybe than Isaac Taylor. By the end of practice, when you watch him walk off, Isaac Taylor Stewart was walking much better, with much more fluidity, and I'm not even sure he had. I don't know if he stayed in the boot or not, but he didn't look like he did walking in. So that's probably a really good sign that he's got a shot. But.
Yeah.
And then you have Solomon Apapupu, and he comes in on a cart where he's got his surgically repaired foot up on the cart. Although by the end of practice, he was in a boot and he was walking. So it's like there are a lot of boots at practice right now.
Yeah, and Jordan Iosefa is still has a ways to go, so he will not be able, probably most likely, for Saturday's game. And Helton was asked if EA cannot go, who will fill in his spot. It looks like Raylan Goforth or Kanai Mauga, but we'll probably get more details about how they're looking on defense and who's going to replace those guys on Wednesday, so stay tuned for that instant. But any final thoughts, Dan, before we wrap it up here?
No, I think it's going to be interesting. This is it. I mean, they're up against it. They can't have any more false steps. They can't have any more, we really played well, but we didn't quite. You got to make it now. They've got to win, every single game from here on out, it looks like. And not that they can't do it, but, they're playing an Arizona team that's also 2-1 in the South. And this is a game that this could be a season ender if you don't handle this properly. So you really got to take care of this game. And then figure out, you get a short week going to Colorado, then you get Oregon here. I mean, it's not bad. It kind of lets you know where you are, and it gives you something to shoot at every week. But, boy, you got to take care of it this week. Yep. And I'm somewhat encouraged by how they handled Notre Dame and what it's done for where they're going this week.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, that's going to wrap it up for USC's Tuesday practice of Arizona Week. For Dan Weber, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.